Alright, so I'm going to do a video on replicating this birch bowl, birch container, basket if you want to say that, that I made some years ago back in 2007 at a community education class with Mr. Minnesota artist named Dennis Chilcote. He was teaching the class. He works in birch bark. He works in and also making brooms from corn straw. He teaches classes at the North House Folk School up in Grand Marais. The links will be below. I did not harvest the bark itself. He runs a class actually that's going on and next month, but it's full. I wasn't able to get on to the class list. But next time, where you actually go out and harvest the actual birch bark. So I decided to do this video on basically making this version of kind of the same basket out of some birch bark that I was able to procure from him. So I want to give him a big thanks for that, so I could kind of work with it a little bit more. And I got two other projects that I want to make out of birch bark that I'm going to try to record on video. But here's this rendition. I'm using a twig from red dogwood. It's very flexible. It's very easy to work with, and I'm actually using wax nylon or artificial sinew to lash on here. You could use traditionally you could use basswood fibers. You can use sinew. You can use dogbane. You can use spruce root that splits very finely but it's very tough and strong. So there's lots of different ways that you can lash this together and put this together. You do need to either use the bark really fresh so it's pliable, or reconstitute it once it dries. This is like the Tupperware of the forest. It's very tough, very durable, and yeah, but you do need to use hot water to get it pliable so that you can work it. So I'm going to kind of walk through the process of actually making this bowl out of birch bark. You do have to procure some for yourself. I think substitutes would be dense cardboard, leather, vegetable tan leather, plastic. So you know, if you use your imagination, you can find some other more easily accessible materials if you don't have a resource for actual birch bark itself to replicate this bowl. And you can make it with a rim or without a rim. So I'm going to show you how to make this. Alright, so I'm looking for a rim for my birch bark container or basket, and it's way early spring. It's March, and I'm here by kind of like a creek pond area here, wetland, and I'm looking at this Red-Osier Dogwood. It grows pretty straight and it's really flexible. It's good. It's good basketry material, and it's very attractive on top of it. I think this will make a good flexible rim. I'm just gonna harvest a couple of stalks. I'm not trying to take out everything, but yeah, apparently there's lots of traditional uses. You could, I guess, the inner bark you dye it. Also, my understanding is the inner bark was used in a traditional native smoking blend. I know that it's good for basketry as well, and so yeah, this looks like a pretty good one. I'm gonna harvest, and then there's another one over here that I may harvest here, and yeah, so this is what we're gonna probably use for the rim. Alrighty then, so I'm gonna try and make a video, couple of videos. I'm gonna adjust this camera a little bit. On birch bark basketry. I've been able to make two types of baskets or containers. This is a simple container that my first experience with birch bark, working with it, which is nature's Tupperware. We have a lot of birch trees in the upper Midwest, zone 4, and birch provides a lot of tools. It's a good word to work with. It provides sap. It provides a bark, which makes containers and canoes and params and stuff. And so we're just gonna kind of go down the rabbit hole of birch bark for a couple of videos here. And this is a piece that I did first some years ago at a community ed class with, this was back in '07, with an instructor, a person that I got to know, Mr. Dennis Chilcote. He's a Minnesota artist who does a lot of birch bark basketry and actually, you know, corn straw broom making as well. And he's an instructor at the North House Folk School in Grand Marais. That's a really cool place to learn traditional skills, you know, and there's some Aboriginal classes as well, but more traditional skills as well, from a native and a Scando-Germanic background, Germans, Scandinavian background. So there's lots of cool classes up there, sailing classes around along Lake Superior and that you can take, and all kinds of just cool stuff that you can learn. This is a project that we made. I'm going to replicate this, and I have Dennis provided me with the raw materials of some birch bark, a couple of sheets, and I'm gonna pull those out in a little bit. But my main thing was to replicate the rim here. Okay, so the rim is this here that he actually, and I'm pretty sure that he used birch wood to make the rim, and that's machined, that's tooled, and maybe you can see, like, see right here, that's how it connects, right? And then on the outer rim, it connects right about here. I'm gonna show it connects right about here, as you can see, right? So we're gonna replicate this, but I don't have machining tools for this, and you know, as y'all know, I like to try to stay on the primitive side of things. So the less hand tools or man-made modern hand tools, the better, in my opinion. Also, how the rim is constructed is there is a braided, I can't remember, this is sweetgrass, I believe, and we braided this and we tucked it in, and as we tucked it in, we stitched, and this is actually using artificial sinew. I'm sure if I wanted to go completely primitive, I could use some backstrap sinew, and then this was, you know, you poke the holes in here. I don't know, I'm going to try to give you an extreme close-up kind of the rim structure all the way around. You poke the holes and you run your thread through, and this is the whole structure of it, right? So we're gonna mimic that, but I'm not gonna use any machine wood to do that. So what I've done is I've gone out and I've harvested some. It's really early spring here. It's March. And I've harvested some raw materials to do rims out of, and the sap is running now, so it's good for people that have trees they can tap for maple sugaring, or even birch sugaring, or whichever. I don't have any trees that I can do that with, so maybe one day we'll cover that as well. Be sure to check out the Canadian Bushcraft channel. Caleb's got some really good native and traditional skills out there, and I think they're sugaring right now, so be sure to check out Canadian Bushcraft. Anyways, so it looks like I've got some willow that's coming up straight. They're starting to just bud. I harvested a few, and what I'm using here for this rim, because it's pretty, is this, what is it, the Red-Osier Dogwood. And this has, you know, a few uses. I believe the inner bark is useful. It's basically shrubbery that you'll see. People will plant it around lakes and ponds to prevent erosion because of the root structure. But what I'm noticing is that a lot of the trees that grow around marshy and wet areas tend to have a lot of uses, and they tend to be very supple. And that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for something that I can almost tie into a knot before it breaks. And right now the sap is running. These are young limbs that are coming up. Nothing's really frozen right now. It's been above freezing for the past week or so. And so these limbs are really bendable. They're really pliant, right? And I could probably almost tie this into a knot if I wanted to. And that's the property that I'm looking for. If you are drying these out And you know, I'm not going to use all of these in one sitting today, and so I will just kind of you know, keep them in the garage outside until I need to use them for a project or whatever. But I will have to reconstitute them, and that means soaking them for a few days in some water, so that they're nice and supple. Right now they were alive. I did detach them from the root. They will dry out eventually. Right now there's a lot of sap running in them, which is really good, or they're still really pliable and supple. So with that said, what I've been able to do is I've been able to create a preliminary rim like this. Okay, so and I'm going to show you how I did this, and this is approximately the same size as this, right? Because I've got a pattern that I'm working on. I'm going to provide a pattern that's going to be free to download. Again, some of my videos I'm going to monetize, or I'm going to make them so that they're pay only, and that's really only because, you know, some of the stuff that I'm learning, I actually have to go out and pay for it to learn, and then I basically regurgitate, or after I've made a few of them, if people are getting benefit out of it, that's great. However, you know, the knowledge costs me a little bit. But you know, the majority of my content, as you know, is going to be free, because I'm really just archiving knowledge, and it's generally for my repository for when I forget how to do something. At any rate, this is that red dogwood. It bends quite well, and it's got a nice red color, so it's going to look really pretty when we're done. And let's see here. I'm going to just replicate what I've done here. So if you're following along, you'll know kind of at least my process. I'm sure there's other ways to do it. This is just something I came up with quickly in my apartment here. So. Okay, so what I've done essentially is I needed to know the circumference of this, right? I didn't know what the circumference was. And if you don't have a tape measure, you can take a piece of cordage or something, and you can just kind of wrap it around whatever it is that you are trying to measure, and then you get your rough circumference, excuse me, and you can then, you know, take a ruler or a yardstick or whatever and kind of measure it out, right? And so I have a piece here that I already cut, and the piece that the circumference is approximately, I thought I already cut it. Right, it went someplace else. Interesting. Well, that's fine. I know how long it is, and it's approximately 20 and a half inches. Right. So I'm gonna measure out here, and my ruler is 12 inches right there, and then I'm gonna measure to 10 and a half from there, and I'm just gonna cut that. Right. I've already kind of done it, so I already know. And this is a pair of pruning shears, or pruning snips. This modern tool makes things faster, is all. And so this is the approximate length or circumference that I'm gonna need. So I'm gonna take another twig of red dogwood that I harvested, and it's still quite fresh. Now again, I'm gonna keep that. I'm going to emphasize that this is fresh, right? If it were dried out and I'm pulling it out to reconstitute it for use, I would have to soak it for a few days to get it moist again, right? And then slowly work it supple, right? But this is fresh. I just went out and harvested it. So I'm going to do is I'm just going to take my length there, and I can measure it out so I know exactly what I need, and it's right to this split here, right? Or where the branches are about to sprout out. So then I know exactly where to take my snips, and I'm just going to cut at that juncture. I'll put this aside for another project or something. And then now I've got my twig that I want to use. Now, since it's still supple, I want to start to try to work it a little bit. I want to kind of bend the fibers a bit, so that the fibers, or at least find out which way it wants to bend, right? There's already a slight curve going on here. So maybe I want to just follow that, right? Because the fibers are already starting to go that direction. You work with nature, don't fight with nature, right? So this already has a bend, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to go with the bend. And I just want to kind of give coax the twig into bending in the direction that I want, that we need it to go, right? And we're cooperating with the way it was doing now. Now, this is not in a position just yet to bend so that we make a knot per se. We're going to get it there, but we're going to have to work it slowly, and it's going to be a process. Because I don't want this to break on me. I didn't harvest the whole shrub, which would have been irresponsible and disrespectful. So I only have a few raw materials to work with. So we're going to kind of go low and slow with this. And I'm going to use my snips to get rid of some of the knobs here. They're not going to be too big of a deal, really, to deal with. But yeah, we'll give it a bend first, all right? And then what I want to do, and it's kind of hard, but I'm going to try to give the perspective of the camera. I want to start to split this with my snips along this plane as it bends, right? So that's the way I want it to bend, right? Because what we're trying to replicate is there's an inner ring, a rim, and there's an outer rim. So we're basically going to replicate that. In the piece that I fashioned before, this has already been split, okay? And it was already starting to bend. So when this dries out, which we're going to just kind of let this dry out overnight, one is going to be the inner ring, and the other is going to be the outer ring, okay? So I want to kind of continue to work this again while it's nice and supple. Kind of start to coax the fibers, and then I want to take my snips. I'm going to look down and find the plane that I need to cut on, and I'm going to start to just kind of cut right down the middle with my snips, right? You would use a knife or a bone tool, a stone tool. Bone tool would work too. It's sharp enough. And you want to just gently start to cut through it. All right. And this piece might take some time, because what you want to do is you want to gently start to split this. Okay, I don't know if we'll be able to show this very well on camera. I'm going to try. Split this down the middle, right? Just gently pull it apart. And as long as it's going down the middle, you're doing good. If it starts to go off to one side, like on this piece here, this side here, it's starting to go towards this side, and it's going to start to get thinner. To correct that, you pull gently but firmly on the side that is thickest. All right, so I'm going to start to kind of pull more on this side. All right, until the split. Again, my camera's not the best for this. I didn't set this up quite right. I'll make it so it's a little easier for everybody. All right, but I want to start to kind of, we want to follow the line as it splits. Now you got to be gentle, because you can go off the rails and then you have to start over again with another stick, right? But I start to pull on the sides that is thickest when it starts to thin out. And sometimes, again, as long as you're nice and gentle, you can get it. And the idea is to go all the way through down the length to evenly split it. Okay, everything's kind of going so far so good. Almost there. Almost there. Almost there. And then I'm going to go ahead and cheat, because we're about there, and I'm just going to go ahead and use the snips to cut it off. You don't have to do this. You can take it all the way to the end. That's fine. So there. So more or less we have two perfectly halved pieces here. All right, of the same twig. All right. So then next, I've got a longer piece of cordage. I've got a longer piece of cordage here, and I want to bind these back together again. Okay, I don't want to work them separately. They're stronger as a whole. And if I try to work them separately, I may break one, or things may not go that well, right? So I'm gonna go ahead and I'm just gonna do an overhand knot. You can do a strangle knot or or whatever, whichever knot. It's just something to bind. I have a double overhand knot here, and I'll put that over the top here of these two. So we stop the wrap and it doesn't come undone, right? So now we have this wrapped up and bound, and now because it's been split and we've already worked it and it's been split, we can really start to work it, the fibers, the way we want it to, and it becomes a little easier, a little bit more pliable to deal with. Okay, so the next step is what I want to do now is we're going to run a bath of hot water. I could boil some water, and we want to just put this in the water, in the hot water, so that the fibers get more supple as we totally go for the final bending and then binding. Okay, so we are in my bathroom next to the bathtub here, and I just got some hot water, and I've got our wrapped twig that's been split, and I just put it in the hot water, and I'm going to continue to kind of work it and kind of bend it to get it to bend. I don't have the means to steam bend, and a lot of wood you can bend using steam. Once you heat up the fibers long and hot enough, then they become supple, and then you put them in a form and you let them dry, which is what I've done here. So I basically put it in a form, which is by binding it together, and I'm going to let it dry. I'm going to let it set, so it'll be easier to work with when we need to make the rim or attach the rim. And so to help with that, I've got my pot here, which is roughly the same diameter as the basket that I'm making. So what I do with this is I'm just going to use this as my form to help bend it, right? So I'll put this here, and I'm just going to kind of bend this around my pot, and I have even pressure around it so that the twig knows what I'm trying to do with it, right? So again, you're working with natural materials and you're trying to coax it and convince it to do what you want it to do. So now we have it wrapped around without it breaking. Looks pretty cool. Looks good. I'm just hold it there for a second, and then we're going to put it back in the water, kind of to reheat it up a little bit. But this should be a successful rim, pre-rim. It should be successful now because we were able to coax the fibers to wrap all the way around the diameter that we wanted. All right. So again, I'm just kind of doing that. Again, I may do it again one more time just for good measure. Right. And then this is the reason why we had the longer cordage, right? Because now I can take this and wrap this very tightly. Don't want to cooperate. A lot of these store-bought twines are treated with like turpentine or something, so they react kind of weird with water. So I just want to wrap this around. Thank you very much, tree branch. All right, and then that's wrapped like that. And so what I can do is I can start to, while it's still supple, I can start to shape it so it's more of a the circle that we want, right? And it seems to be conforming pretty well and holding the shape that we want. And then, so we end up having this hoop. Now, this can be done for people that are into making dream catchers and such like that. It can be done for making dream catchers and stuff. I've used wild grapevine is kind of better. To do that, wild grapevine could have been done for this as well. I just chose a dogwood because of the pretty red color. So at any rate, here's the two hoops or rims that we're going to use for birch bark container. For the other basket, I may use like either this one or this one, because I'm gonna make 2 birch bark baskets. But I'm starting with the one that I've worked on first, and then we'll go into the other one. Hopefully, we'll get to that. But so this is the process that I'm using. The concept is to reconstitute or use twigs that are supple. You can almost tie them into a knot without them breaking. If you do have them dried out, you're going to have to steam bend them or water them down and reconstitute them. Usually hot water works best. And then you go ahead and you bend it and conform it and shape it the way you need to. Let it set in this position, let it dry in this position, and then you'll be good to go.